There's a busy and full agenda for Jacksonville City Council President Ron Salem, pointing this week to a local hospital and some key numbers.
I wanted to educate the council and the community on UF health.
President Salem explains his concerns and what could change both for the hospital and for patients, especially if Duval County's jail moves to a new location. Dr. Salem is our guest today. We'll also talk to a war hero and congressman about a national mystery in Washington. Michael Waltz gives his view on the secrecy surrounding Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's health. That's here on This Week in Jacksonville. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hosted Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan last week. I am so glad to have City Council President Ron Salem with us today. So, Dr. Salem, you've been president since July, so 6 more months of that one-year term, and I know you've got a kind of a lengthy agenda. Definitely want to get into some of those things that are priorities for you. Let's talk briefly, though, about that holiday surprise that happened when the mayor's office had the Confederate monument in Springfield Park removed. You said that you're really concerned most about how that happened. What are those concerns? And I know you filed some legislation on it as well.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I must first state that I'm not litigating the monument coming down. I'm litigating the process that was used to take it down. And there were several issues of concern to me. One, private dollars were used but were bypassed by the city council. That's a major concern of mine. The monument and that park are historic. They've been designated historic. It's well understood that's the case. And anytime you do work in that park, it requires what we call a certificate of appropriateness that comes from the planning department. That was not obtained. When I questioned Mr. Fackler, the general counsel, at our hearing at the Rules Committee, he stated he did not need to contact the planning department. I think that's a big red flag in this process. Number 3, we still don't have an opinion from him. He has advised me that I'll have an opinion Tuesday. He did pass out at our hearing a draft document that he said reflected his thoughts, but something of this significance, I think we deserve to have a formal opinion from him.
And that was what the mayor had said. Hey, I went to general counsel, I got an okay there, that's why I moved forward. I asked the mayor last week, and she said, boy, you should ask that question of the council members. How is this different than what Mayor Curry did a few years ago when he had the monument in front of City Hall removed?
Well, number one, there are several differences. One, that entity is not designated historic. It was a gift to the city. Number two, the dollars used were under $100,000, did not require a CIP process that would come to the council. Number 3, he moved around some dollars in the Parks Department, which he's allowed to do, to hire someone to take that thing down. I complained about it to the administration. I didn't think it was the right thing to do at the time, but he appeared to do everything correctly in order to take down that monument.
Good idea, maybe not. I'm trying to get at what your argument is here, or how you're litigating this. Isn't it a good idea not to use public dollars for something that might have been done with private dollars, as the mayor did in this case?
If it comes through the city council, I don't have a problem using private dollars. The point is, I think every dollar that comes into the city, with few exceptions, ought to be approved by the city council. In this case, it wasn't. Ken, I have spoken to leadership from the Austin administration forward. I've spoken to several general counsels. In general, they're appalled at the decision and appalled by the fact that we received a draft document at our hearing versus a formal opinion that laid out specifically why he ruled the way that he did. Hopefully we'll have that Tuesday.
So let me move on, because I know there are a bunch of topics that we talk about. Hey, we want to get into this. One of those, we're learning that there's a good chance of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office headquarters downtown could be moving in a few years, and this is as city leaders are discussing building a new jail. We talked about that on the show. City Council talked about the plans for future during this special workshop we saw about UF Health this week. Maybe explain the connection there between the jail and medical care that people get at UF Health.
Well, one of my initiatives that is being led by Michael Boylan on the City Council is to take a look at a new jail. And we're looking at size, services, and everything else related to the jail, as well as the police memorial building. The indigent care that occurs in this city inmates that are sent from the jail to the hospital are under that indigent care contract, so we're paying for those things. As a part of the analysis that Kim Taylor did from the auditor's office and her team, we found out that roughly a third of the indigent care done in the hospital is for inmates, which was a little shocking to me that it was that large. And I think there are a lot of inmates that are sent from the jail to the hospital because we lack an infirmary of any sort, of any significance in the jail. So one of the things, as we look at a new jail, we need to make sure we build one that has those type of services so we can keep inmates within the jail so we don't have to transport them to the hospital. And we're spending about $7 million a year on security. Once they arrive at the hospital, they've got to be guarded. So there are a lot of issues that came out through that meeting.
And one of the things we've reported on in the last several months is about care of prisoners, folks who are there at the Duval County Correctional Center, even some deaths here. And so that got into this whole thing with the sheriff saying, hey, we're going to change who we contract with for medical services. But that's tens of millions of dollars, right?
Right.
On top of, a certain level of care can't be done at the jail, you've got to take patients, inmates where they can be patients and correctly cared for. Is that accurate?
That's all accurate. We are obligated to provide the health care for the inmates. In fact, if an inmate is released and he's in the hospital, we still pick up that tab until he's well enough to go home. So it's a big issue, and I think it can be done much more cost effectively once we get into a new jail, unless we can somehow free up some space within the jail to construct a clinic of some sort.
Well, and one of the phrases you used there was indigent care, and as I've understood for years, UF Health, that's the location where folks who can't afford care, people who are without a home. What's the city doing in terms of addressing those who are homeless or homelessness?
Well, through the budget process, we put together a couple of, I think, major bills. One is what we call a homeless diversion bill, which is to keep people from becoming homeless. This bill will allow us to pay an individual $1,500 to keep them from becoming homeless. If they're right on the verge of homeless, we've got a program where they can come to us, and if it's a rent or their car broke down or something of that nature, we can pay that bill and keep them from becoming homeless. Kent, the last homeless count we did in Jacksonville, there were 1,200 homeless people, and 700 of those were first-time homeless. So anything we can do to cut that number down, which appears to be a compassionate thing to do, prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place. Yeah,
it's an issue that many cities deal with, and obviously there needs to be a creative solution here. I want to keep talking about the creative solutions that you have. We've asked City Council President Salem to stay with us because I want to learn more about the most recent delay to the renovating of the historic Laura Street Trio. That's just one of the things we're going to discuss next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And Jacksonville City Council President Ron Salem is our guest today. So, Dr. Salem, downtown Jacksonville, it's got this historic block, more than 100 years old. It's known as the Laura Street Trio. For folks who aren't familiar, they learn about it and say, oh, this is really cool. What we've learned recently is that the developer, the owner right now, Steve Adkins, has had it 10 years. There seem to be proposals all the time. Hey, here's what we're going to do. The most recent came to City Council and I would say was rejected, was sent back to Downtown Investment Authority. What's going on there? How do you feel about it? Don't you want to see redevelopment or repurposing of this area?
I absolutely do. First of all, the Downtown Investment Authority decided not to act upon a proposal given to them by Mr. Atkins, and it was kicked to the City Council without a recommendation. So I decided to hold what I call a committee of the whole, where you bring the whole council together, sort of in a committee structure, to hear the deal. We heard from our finance people, we heard from our auditors, and we heard from Mr. Atkins' team. And I think that the council had a lot of apprehension on this particular loan that potentially the city could end up losing a lot of money if the deal went bad.
And initial reports there was $20 million some dollars in loans, but there was a longer term ramification, right?
Of around $125 to $150 million. So what we decided to do is send it back to the Downtown Investment Authority and said, rework this deal. And I've talked to both Lori Boyer and Jim Citrano, the chairman of the board, and said, you guys need to use some urgency here. Don't hurry, but use urgency. And let's get a deal back to the city council. We all would like to see the Laura Street Trio developed, but we need to have a deal that is more conventional than the one that I think was in front of us.
Is it all connected, or is this just bad timing for someone who wants some city buy-in on a development proposal there when the city has got some other pretty sizable financial concerns coming? I'm talking about the stadium and those sorts of things.
Well, I don't think it's related to that. It's just very expensive to renovate old buildings like this. You don't know what you're going to get into. And I'm very supportive of the city providing significant assistance in this process, but it needs to be one that we can live with, and if something goes bad, we're not holding it.
Yeah, and you and I, we're not developers, so I don't know that I understand necessarily the fine points of it, but what's the right kind of partnering or proposal that would get city council to say, yes, we're in for this amount?
Well, I think that the council, if I can speak for them, is looking for a more traditional approach of completion grants, rev grants, historical grants, versus us sort of holding a loan in itself. And I think if a deal comes back structured in that way, it'll get a positive response from the council. Okay. And I hope to get it done while I'm president, frankly.
Yeah, so within these next 6 months.
That's
what I
correct.
just heard. So I did want to ask about this. I saw this week that the city of Jacksonville was talking about the sports commission and what the opportunities are. This is something we talked about on our podcast just at the beginning of this year, sports tourism. What level of priority do you place on that, and what do you want to see? We were talking about just a moment ago off camera about the NCAA tournament, men's basketball, women's basketball.
It's a tremendous emphasis of mine. I'm a sports guy. When we had a sports board back in the 90s, I served on it for almost 15 years and chaired it 4 times, and it was abolished in the 2000s, I think around 7 or 8, about 15 years ago. It was a priority of mine when I became president. What we have done is moved $1.5 million from the Tourist Development Council that I chair as president to Visit Jacksonville. The idea is we want to set up a board of people, 7 to 9, that would be appointed by Mayor Deegan and myself to really go after events, all sorts of NCAA events, not just football and basketball, volleyball, lacrosse, soccer. Bring those type of events to Jacksonville. As well as we're looking to renovate the stadium, we want to bring in all sorts of events in there, whether it be concerts, other football games, to get into the playoff format. I think we're missing the boat in Jacksonville on sports tourism, and this will give us a jump start. So
what are the barriers? Because as we were talking about, I think we go back to 2019, last time the NCAA basketball tournament was here. And you just talked about there used to be, do you feel like we've dropped the ball in some sense?
I think in some cases we did drop the ball. That NCAA tournament was here 3 times. I went all 3 times. It was a terrific event. You had people from all over the country here, and we lost it. And I think we can work on getting it back. We have an arena that accommodates that. And that's one of the first priorities I would assign to this group. Go back and let's bring that back to Jacksonville.
All right. I love that you decided, yeah, I'd come back on the show today. City Council President Ron Salem, thanks so much for talking through those issues with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, so as we move on nationally, it was stunning to learn that the Secretary of Defense had surgery and was in the hospital, but no one in the White House knew about it. Congressman Michael Waltz gives us his opinion next on This Week in Jacksonville. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
We're looking at national and international news here. The United States remains a concerned ally for Israel and Ukraine as both of those countries continue armed conflicts. We found out this week that the Secretary of Defense was hospitalized twice but did not alert the White House, the public, and most of his staff. I spoke with Congressman Michael Waltz about that issue.
Well, it just is absolutely bizarre, and it should alarm every American that in a position of trust, the Secretary of Defense essentially disappeared for a week, was in intensive care. President Biden didn't know about it, and the Secretary's own deputy, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, didn't know about it. Meanwhile, we have ships, including those based in Mayport, being fired upon by the terrorist Houthi organization with anti-ship missiles. We have our bases being fired upon by Iranian-backed Iranian militias in Iraq. We have multiple wars going on. And oh, by the way, with how our nuclear triad works, you have 15 minutes to respond to an ICBM where the Secretary of Defense gets on the line and advises the president for a response. And had that happened, they literally couldn't find the guy. It was a dereliction of duty, and we're demanding answers.
And in my conversation, I then asked Representative Waltz about the argument that some might make that the secretary felt he wasn't going to be incapacitated, he values his privacy, and that he was just having a procedure done, and whether there's anything to that side of the argument. And this is what Representative Waltz said.
When you join the military, and every veteran knows this, you surrender some of that privacy. But when you become a cabinet officer in charge of the most powerful military in the world, capable of destroying the world, those soldiers and sailors out on that line deserve to know that if you're incapacitated in any way, and he was under general anesthesia at some point, that your deputy steps in and that your supervisor, in this case, the President of the United States, is informed. Heck, anybody who has a job just can't disappear for a week, much less those in a special position of trust. I think the Secretary should hold himself to the same standard that he would hold any general or any admiral, all the way down to the lowest ensign in the Navy, for example. You can't just disappear. You have to have a deputy step into that role, and you have to let your supervisor know. Anybody else would have been fired for not doing that, much less someone in this special position of trust. So we'll see if the president holds him accountable. After the Afghanistan withdrawal, Kent, and he didn't hold him accountable then for that debacle, I don't expect accountability now. But I would hope that that the secretary, as a retired general himself, would hold himself to the same standard that he holds the military.
We then moved our conversation to the topic of the Middle East. You heard the congressman earlier mention the Houthi rebels. Well, this week, we've heard comments from the Biden administration that there may need to be some sort of American response to the attacks. So I asked for the congressman's view on that situation.
I don't know what it's going to take for this administration to hit back. Right now, I know that our ship captains aren't allowed, when they detect the anti-ship missile launch from the Houthis on the shore, they aren't allowed to hit them where they're launching from. They're only allowed to shoot down the missile itself. That's like telling a police officer, Kent, you can swat down the bullets, but you can't take out the shooter. They're not allowed to do that. I don't know if it's going to take a ship getting hit. Our bases are already getting hit. We now just had an American flagged tanker get seized by the Iranians. This administration is it seems to be so afraid of any type of escalation. They're allowing the Iranians, allowing the terrorists to continue to hit us, and they aren't letting our sailors hit back and go to the root of the problem. And that is, it's dangerous. And my fear is someone's going to die because of this bad policy.
I then asked the congressman about the decision-making process when you're facing a very delicate situation like this.
Anybody knows, you keep getting picked on in the schoolyard. Sometimes you have to escalate. You got to punch the bully in the mouth. You got to be tough to de-escalate the situation. But if you keep appeasing, you keep giving more lunch money, you're only going to invite more aggression. And I know that's a simplistic analogy, but that's essentially what is happening right now. Terrorists like the Houthis, like Hamas, like the Iranian regime, they see this appeasement and weakness as opportunity, and it's actually inviting more aggression. It's actually escalating the situation even further. Sometimes you have to escalate to de-escalate. You need to do it proportionally. Nobody's advocating for a wider war, but we saw what happened in the last administration. The Iranians hit shipping. They hit oil refineries. They hit our embassy. They killed an American. President Trump took out their field general Soleimani, and peace was restored. It all stopped. That's how you have to deal with these people.
Congressman Waltz served in the U.S. Army as a Green Beret. He serves in the House of Representatives the past 6 years, elected to the seat Ron DeSantis left open when he ran for and was elected as governor in Florida. And Florida's annual legislative session began this week with the Senate approving a series of education bills. They're aimed at reducing regulations on public schools. Now, one bill focuses on teacher recruitment and would ease a number of barriers for entering teaching. Another bill would allow parents more say on whether students are retained in schools. The bills now head across the rotunda to the House. And a proposed bill that would roll back child labor laws in Florida passed the second committee stop Wednesday, House Bill 49. It would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work more than 30 hours a week during the school year and work past 11 on school nights. The bill has one more stop before hitting the House floor. The Senate version of the measure, though, hasn't moved in that chamber just yet. All right, City Council member Jimmy Peluso is with us next time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17. And you'll find us online at news4jax.com or streaming on News4Jax Plus. And I don't want you to forget to check out our streaming podcast. It's This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition, focused on economic development in our area. This week's episode looks at the upcoming Jacksonville Venture Competition. We release new episodes every Thursday at 9 a.m. You'll find them right now on News4Jax Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.